Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She is the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's Her Conversations is Kontomble Voice Diviner, Liv Mokai Wheeler. The Kontomble are elemental beings, little people, and if we think about it, most cultures reference them. Many of us are familiar with tales of fairies, elves, and gnomes. These are all souls who preceded us on the planet and consequently hold beneficial wisdom. Liv travels the world holding healing rituals, has published a book, and in January of 2019 released a feature-length documentary called The Remembering. During our conversation, she shares how she came to work with the Kontomble, the changes she needed to make in order to do so, and why their message is so necessary for our times. And of course, there's so much more. So as always, I begin by asking all my guests on the podcast, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel at your most her?
When I feel into that, and recently I found myself more drawn towards, I practice yoga and different forms of yoga over the years, and I like moving out in and out also of loving Kundalini Yoga. And there's something about that, I got to practice this morning, and there's something about Kundalini that feels like it's also in that higher energetic resonance. That's what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, the higher energetic resonance. And also I feel in that space also really in ritual, also in the higher energetic resonance, that space where all is possible,
Perfect, thank you. And I'm just so fascinated by the work that you do now.
Thank you.
And I just want to find out where you came from in terms of how did your life lead you up to the point where you're working and working with the little people and doing such deep and profound and specialized work. Where did you start?
I feel like when I consider that, the starting point in some way is, it was when I was much younger, and it was basically what led me to this in a way. It was to do the opposite of this, to be led into my path or into my soul's true expression. It started by doing the opposite of that. It was to do like that which is not my path, which was to be conditioned by society in such a way, where I went to college and basically ingested the programming that says that you go to college and you get a profession that is very lucrative and so on and so forth. And so I did that. By age 21, I was working as a court reporter in the States, and I thought that I was like doing everything right. I thought I was doing everything right because it was right in the eyes of my family, and it was right in the eyes of like society where I was. And I like in some sense, I mean, people talk about awakening more these days. In some sense, that was some kind of like wake up call for me, because I thought I was doing everything right and everything felt wrong. I was doing everything right by the outer culture where I was locally, and internally everything felt wrong. And that was the indicator, that was like making more money than I had ever made. And I thought I was like, this was like that to me, I thought that was like arriving. And then I quickly got disillusioned, because I realized like, whoa, money is not making me happy. This is not my path. it felt awful to me. And I was in like court systems where I was seeing a lot of like hypocrisy and a lot of like cheating and stealing and all sorts of things that was all happening like off the record. And it really it was like a wake up call for me. And so I realized at that time that I couldn't live life in that way. I really couldn't. And so I just basically like set off to follow my heart, really. And that like living somebody else's life didn't work. And so I set off to live my own life. And that how I arrived there was really originally by following my heart and listening to my intuition, which led me into the healing arts. And I basically just like love to be in the field of healing and transformation. And so I just kind of was soaking it up and loving being around basically healers, and then it was just kind of continuing to follow the signs, which now I realize that was spirit guiding me all the time. I just didn't know it at the time. I only could recognize it as intuition, or there was like this little faint voice inside that was like barely detectable, but I just started to commit to that little voice, which coincidentally lived inside of my heart. And so it was, continuously like one step, one step, one step, one step, one step. And everything was thankfully feeling more right, more right, more right, more right, more right internally. And then that led me to my longtime teacher, Melanoma. And then, yeah, I studied and apprenticed with Melanoma for I think it was 8 years, and he lives in the States, but he's from Burkina Faso in West Africa. And so, in some ways, this is like, in some ways, I just have a very strange life because, like you would look at me and say, well, outwardly, I, don't appear to be African. Like, obviously, I'm not. And yet, that, our souls have sometimes to follow our souls longing or our soul's like North Star. It sometimes outwardly looks very different than what one would expect, and that was true. And so once I started studying with Maladama, it really, really like kicked in or ignited this like a quickening with my remembering, and then I would go and to the country where he comes from, which is Burkina Faso, and the tribe that he comes from are the Dagara people of Burkina Faso. And and each time I would journey there, I would just kind of continue to ignite these rememberings and initiations, sometimes planned, sometimes not planned. And then lo and behold, it would be within the tradition of the Dagara people that they would have this cosmology, which includes the Kontomble. The Kontomble are the little people of Burkina Faso, the Dagara people. And so their cosmology includes the Kontomble. But what I've since learned is that all cosmologies around the earth also include the little people. If you trace their origins, and these are, in some ways, we could say the little people of Burkina Faso. And so what I learned or discovered or remembered through my journeys and my initiations in Burkina was that I am what they would call a Kontomble person or Kontomble woman, meaning that I walk with Kontomble, and in some ways, and soul level, I also am one, which is confusing to people to hear, and also it's true. But and so I would have these experiences where I would go and work with diviners or the shamans, their medicine people in the different tribes, also in different villages, and I would keep hearing that, and sometimes they would be like bewildered about how this Western woman had all these, or was walking with all of these Kontomble. Like, how is this possible? I don't know, but this is like, this has been my life. And so as as it's continued to unfold and as I've continued to understand more of the messages that they are giving me, or like basically having like a line of communication open with them, they've just revealed this really, really beautiful life, especially in the past few years. It's gotten especially very, very beautiful.
And how did, because I mean, you tell your story and you've probably told it so many times that it's like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But
Yeah.
you know, there was this there must have been this transition, like the first time that maybe you came across Melanoma. How was that? How did you actually find him or make that connection? Did you read about him in a book, or how did you make that initial connection and then know that you needed to follow up and actually meet him and be initiated by him?
Well, basically, so when I was in my like deep in my healing studies, and I guess what was becoming like psychic spiritual studies, I just didn't label it as such. I was having this feeling that there was a next thing that I was supposed to do, but I didn't have the language for it. And so I put the question out to the universe of, what is this thing? What is this thing that I can sense? But what is that? Like, what is my next step? And then the messages, it came in like three, in the form of three one day, that it was somebody gave me a book, I received a flyer in the mail, and there was some other thing too. And the common theme with all of those was shamanism. And at that time, I had no idea even exactly what shamanism was. It was just very clear. It was like, oh, that. Okay, well, that was like a clear sign. And so one of the flyer that came in the mail, the woman who was leading this year-long course of study, she was a woman that I had worked with before, that I really liked working with her, and so I signed on to that, and it all felt so familiar to me, and that's the best way I can say it. It felt very familiar, and then it was like, okay, yeah, this is it. Whatever this is, like, this feels so familiar, and somehow I was able to really trust it too, because I remember when I was training with her, this woman named Sylvia, and when I was training with her, I remember people would really get hung up on, oh, am I making this up, or is this real or not? And somehow I just knew I knew it was real. I just knew all of it. I knew that was real, that like the other world, basically the spirit realm. And I wanted to just keep going, and she was only leading that year long, and at the end of that, she was telling our group, if you're curious, basically, to keep studying. She was listing off this. There were all of these books, by so-called shamans, and when she was speaking about the books, there was one in particular. It was like that, and that was Melanoma's book of Water and the Spirit. And so that was the only book I wrote down. It was like that's the one. And I actually forgot to get that book, and I was living in Berkeley, California at the time, and there was a friend, Laurence, who was in town from France, and he called me. And anyway, basically, we went for a walk. He was staying with his friend Arjua, and so we were walking and we were talking, and he was talking about past lives, and we were talking about these, kind of spiritual phenomenon. And he was saying, oh, I'm reading this book that I really appreciated. And anyway, so he said the name of the book, which was Of Water and the Spirit, which was really like noteworthy synchronicity. That's not like a book that everybody is talking about, like everybody's talking about Of Water in the Spirit. And I was like, whoa, thank you for saying that. I was meaning to get that book. And he said, well, you probably could borrow it from Ajua. She found it on the street. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Tattoos. We were walking to Oshawa's house, and then I was like, what? And so when I got the book, once I returned home, I started reading the book, and I feel like I read it in 3 days or something. I just like tore through the book, and I was like, oh my God, who is this? I just knew I was meeting my teacher, and it was so clear to me. I was like, where is he? Is he in Africa? Where is he? That's my teacher. And it just was so strong. And then I looked online, and there was a start of a 3-year training, and it was so right. It was like as right could be. And every time when I would go and study with Melanoma, and it just every time I was like, bam, that is exactly right, exactly where you need to be. And it just, so it just kept going like that. And then at the end of the training, he would ask me to come back um, to apprentice or to assist, and it just kept going like that.
Mm. So beautiful that it happens like that. You find it in the street. Oh my God.
I know. I was just like, are you kidding? Like, I mean, that's kind of, serendipitous.
Well, it's like, are you looking for a sign? Well, here. You can't get better
Exactly.
than
Like,
that.
it could fall from the sky. I mean, they could make it a little simpler, but finding it on the street is just like it's practically falling from the sky.
That's so good. And and just a quick diversion because I'm coming back to you. I remember I did a song years ago called Attraction, which was about the law of attraction. And where I was living at the time, it wasn't the best of accommodations. So, I didn't really want to touch anything that was outside, but there was this little red card that had attraction written on it. And I kept walking past and go, oh, isn't that funny? It's the name of that song. I just kept walking past it. And this thing just kept dancing around like the front of the front door until one day it was placed on the wall. So it wasn't even on the ground. So it was like, clearly they were like, okay, we know that you don't want to touch the ground. So like, it's here now. You're going to pick this thing up. And I picked it up and I actually framed it. So I know about things dropping out the sky.
Wow. Yeah, you work with synchronicity a lot, don't you?
Yeah, I feel it, and I'm. It's when I don't follow it, then I'll get a kick up the leg because things get more and more painful when you kind of go, please help me out, give me a sign, and then you get signs left, right, and center, and you're like, I can't see anything, and then
I know, and then it seems like when we actually follow it, then they increase too.
Yeah,
it makes it so much easier for spirit to communicate with us.
Yeah, I'm getting better at hearing the whispers and it's a very easy path. It's very subtle, I think. And I think because we come from a world, especially when we've got like smartphones and like things going off all the time, we want like notifications and red ticks and all of that kind of stuff and expect it to be like that. Whereas a lot of the time it's like you wake up first thing in the morning and it's just like there in your head, or you feel it on your skin, or it kind of like passes you, or it's written on somebody's t-shirt, and it's like so in your face and so subtle sometimes that you're like, nah, it can't be true, because
I love that you said the part that you said about that it can be very subtle too. I love that you say that too, because I do find that when we're like if people are into meditation or when we kind of practice that attuning to the subtle realm, I've just only kind of like been able to identify that more recently, maybe in the past year. It can be very subtle, but when we attune ourselves in those subtle ways, attune ourselves to the subtleties, then I appreciate that you said that.
How was your training? How did it actually take place? What were you doing?
Oh, well, when I was training with Melanoma in the States, then we were, I mean, to say it in a simple way, we were we were doing ritual basically. So we were doing ritual with our ancestors, and we were doing ritual, elemental rituals also. So engaging with the elements. And that was like the lot of what I was doing in my studies with Melanoma. And then in Burkina, I don't know, there'd be so much of it just got ignited. It's like, I guess I've more recently become aware of our multidimensional selves, or, been able to think of myself in that way, or that feels very true, that we're multidimensional. And so it felt like these multi-dimensional aspects of my being were just totally getting woken up and like coming online. And so there, I was, for example, the first time when I was there, I was sitting down with a woman diviner named Alice, and then she was seeing certain things about my energy with this Kontomble energy, and seeing that there was basically again, it was a situation where she was kind of confused that this woman from America had these kinds of connections already, having never been to Burkina before. And so then she was kind of creating the framework around something that was just igniting already organically. It was the Kontomble were kind of coming alive in my being before I even was conscious of what was happening. And so in Burkina, then she was kind of like creating the framework, and then she would say, oh well, it's going to be important for you to come back in 6 months to a year. And then I would say, well, what is it, 6 months or a year? And she would say, oh, you'll know. And it would happen just like that. And that was the guidance also that I was receiving from Melanoma, that I would keep getting called back to Burkina, and it would happen like that, sometimes like clockwork. And then it would start to come in my dreams really strong, and I would just have this like desire to return. And then so each time when I would return, it was the same. It was, basically doing a lot of rituals, and doing a lot of rituals with the diviners, or what people would think of as like shamans there. And then, but so there was like the so-called like planned work, or something that seems more planned. And then there was what also happened too, that one of the times that I went to Burkina, we actually visited Kontomble caves, which totally rocked my world. I mean, when you experience them in the flesh, I mean, there's some things that like really, when you experience spirit in the flesh, it can like totally rock your whole world. And so I experienced that. And I guess before that time, it was prescribed to me to, like, for example, one of the times when I worked with Alice, that I would be wearing white every night to sleep, and I was given bells to ring all the time. And it's like, okay, well, what happens when you ring the bells? And nothing gets spelled out. It's just like you just ring the bells. Okay, cool. So what's gonna happen when I ring the bells? We don't know. It's not gonna be told to me. We have to find out. So doing my thing, ringing the bells. But then one of the times when I was there, and I was, always wanting to go to these Kontomble caves, and then actually going there and actually like experiencing them in the flesh, and it totally rocked my world. And all of my Western conditioning just got shattered. And so I kind of was a little bit shattered from that in ways. And when I went back to the States, I was living in San Francisco at the time. And basically I ended up contracting, or I got malaria. Like, I had malaria, learned once I was in San Francisco. And then all these like fever symptoms and everything had started coming in strong. And then I learned that in San Francisco, like, they don't really deal with malaria. Like, it's not a thing. So by the time, I was like hoping it wasn't malaria, and it was malaria. And so it was actually New Year's that I went to the hospital. And by that time I was like, not seeing straight and really like vomiting. I was dying basically. I mean, I knew I was dying. And I when I was it was like being at that threshold space, and I was there, and my friend was with me, and I asked her to like call my mom to tell her I was dying, and she was like, "You can't ask me to do that." I'm like, "I am dying. I don't know how I know. I am dying." And they did tests on me, and then it was true. I had like a day to live, basically, and they got the like a treatment in time. But when I was there and I was like vomiting and I was having this experience, these like squeaky sounds started coming through my voice, and I could feel also the Kontomble energy very strong. And I was asking them, I was like, what in the hell is going on right now? I was like being on fire. And they were saying initiation. And I got actually like, I was livid. I was just like, how many times do I have to go through initiation? Because my initiations have not been easy. And so I got really angry at them, and I was like, how many times do I have to go through initiation? And anyway, and so these like strange sounds were coming through my vocal cords, and obviously I lived through it. And I have since learned that like in a lot of, it's like said to be a thing that happens in shamanic or with so-called people like us bridge people, that we go through these like near death experiences and gain certain abilities, and that happened. And so I didn't know until after that time, when I would be ringing the bells and shaking my rattle, then those strange sounds continued, and developed over like 6 months time. It developed into a language. It was the Kontomble's language. And so the way I experienced it was, my vocal cords kind of getting stretched and remade and all of that. And, to the point that they were finally able to like stream through me. And then at some point it felt like a switch turned on, and I was able to actually understand what they were saying. So they successfully, it was almost like they downloaded their language or their knowledge or something into me, and then I was able to successfully understand it. And so yeah, I mean, a pretty surreal process. And the language that they communicate through me, it would be similar to a language like a tongue, that you could hear in Burkina. If you go and you sit with this is a traditional way, if you sit with a diviner, a Kontomble Voice Diviner in the village in Burkina, you'll hear the Kontomble communicating in a similar way. I didn't know that was going to happen. And that's what I was saying, that I was kind of joking, and I was like not knowing what was going to happen when I put these herbs on myself and I'm sleeping in white and I'm ringing these bells. But I think what was the real catalyst for it, my sense, is that it was that initiation that happened, that got ignited when I went to the caves. And because I hadn't come, the energy of the Kontomble realm was so strong in that cave, and that was like, it just totally activated this initiation that brought me into like Death's Gate, and then eventually basically gave me life, and that's what I've since learned with the Kontomble, is that they are stewards of life. And so ironic that you would come to, intimately connect with death in order to appreciate the splendor of life. And that's what's happening, and that's what I hear about the little people around the earth, is that they're guardians of life, they're stewards of life, and there are a lot of times like they're guardians of nature. And that's what they're trying to steward life, basically.
With your understanding of being like a connector, almost like you call your business is like the ancestors bridge, and you are this bridge between the two worlds, because like you said, your Western thinking had to be shattered, because most people, I'm sure know that if you tell them that you go and speak to little people, you know, we it's almost like fairy tales when
totally.
when we're thinking about like fairies and elves and leprechauns, and yet they exist. Because if you say that to anybody, they can envisage them, but they exist. But then we decide that they're not real for some reason, and for so, you know, we separate the fact that something exists and the fact that it's real, and make them into two separate things. If I'm making sense on that, how long did it take? How did you get to that point where you just knew it was a real thing, even though you'd spent so long with the conditioning of these are the things that are real, and anything outside of that is fantasy?
I mean, basically, so I've had a practice for 14 years, and basically, I mean, I've believed for a while that it's real. It was. I mean, I believed that it was real when I was in Burkina at the cave. There was just still a fair amount of conditioning that needed to get shattered. There's been a deep internal knowing. When I started reading Melanoma book, that's what I kept having the feeling is like I knew this was real. So somehow I had a deep internal knowing that it was real, and also what was really important, especially like being like a Western woman, you know, like living very much in like the Western culture. I needed to really kind of protect this knowing. I needed to really be careful about who I was surrounding myself with, and that's been a very deliberate practice. And also simultaneously, the deeper I went into my path, I did lose friends. I lost friends. I lost a relationship. Like because it was so threatening to people. Some people, my path basically of being a bridge to the other world. It felt too threatening to people and to some people, and so I've needed to really, really be, especially when it was just when I was kind of like stoking the fire inside of myself, like, you know, getting the fire going of this like inner knowing. At first I needed to really, really shelter that fire, because more towards the beginning, I mean, it seemed like nearly any person that I would sit with, I was always sitting with some degree of their doubt at the beginning of the session. And I could sense it, you know, I'm sensitive, and so I could sense it. And I would just have to be patient with it, and then just surrender, and spirit would talk through, and then they would maybe go into a space of wonder, wow, oh my gosh, this is real. And so working with Westerners, it felt like it was more towards the beginning. I was always like sitting with that in some way just to do my work. And so I've needed to kind of just be spacious with that. And it's such a Western construct. It really is Western conditioning, because as maybe you are aware too, by when one travels around the world, you come to realize that I mean, to me, that's one of the things I love about traveling and experiencing different cultures is you see, okay, we're all human, and you come to find out, oh, okay, we all have our basic humanity, and then what makes this person like this and this person like that? It's you know, it's these choices that humans are making in the various cultures, and then also there is conditioning. And so it is like it's the Western condition. It's like church and state, you know, kind of went to work on women, especially, it seems, but you know, kind of went to work on us. And where, you know, with the witch burnings and everything else that happened, and people are so frightened, you know, by now there's so much trauma in people's system, modern people, to even like utter, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, am I going to be locked up for this? You know, it's taken, I will tell you, it's taken a lot of courage, because I knew that. I mean, when I first started talking more openly, the ancestors is fun, it's more chewable for people. It's like, okay, that's not so far out there to people, it's like, okay, they can like almost get with that. But then to talk about little people, because they equate little people, of course, with fairy tale. That's the way the conditioning has gone. They've been relegated to the fairy tale. And so I just kind of had to like be patient and just be like, okay, yeah, there's like the giggle, the uncomfortable giggle that happens. And so I had to kind of just like stay steady with what I knew inside and just stay steady with it. And hearing my mom also, this is crazy, or a lot of people just thinking it's crazy. And then by now they're like, oh, maybe you were onto something. Like, maybe I was. Maybe. I mean, I had no idea. Honestly, I had no idea that I've been very excited about like learning about the universality of like the little people. I had no idea, and that was just, lo and behold. I mean, there are stories all over the world in Peru, or if I'm in Denmark, or if I'm in Iceland, that's a more obvious one. I mean, really all over the world, or Mongolia. If I ask people questions, and that's the fascinating thing, is that the stories are so similar. Or in North America, there's like the native people, all have stories. Like one of my Lakota friends, it's like, they have five names for the little people, and that's according to the element that they come through, whether that's mountain or water or so on and so forth. So it's super fascinating. I had no idea that this would just become, especially I had no idea that I'd be traveling around the world so much, and I had no idea that I would learn so much, that I would be like, have a role in the kind of excavation of these stories, and to point to the universality of the little people on the planet, and that they've been here since the beginning. We're here with all of our original ancestors. They understand. I feel like there's not anything I can ask them that they don't have an answer to. I feel like I can ask them about anything. If I ask them about, Atlantis, or, this particular tree, or why women are, docile in a certain way, or we're still kind of subservient. I mean, anything, and they'll tell me about it. It's really super fascinating.
If across the world, everywhere that you go, all these different cultures, all these different countries, there's still this common thread of their version of little people, their version of the keepers of the earth that have all of this knowledge, that kind of like would make sense as to why there's been this like mass suppression of turning them into this kind of fairy tale, they don't exist kind of thing. And it's, why do you think there's such a fear that an everyday person can actually go and communicate with the keeper of the earth and find out the truth about life? Who is it? What are they so scared of us knowing? If you have the answer.
That's a great question. That's a great question. It's that brings up a lot of energy. It's because I mean, if I dare say, I mean, clearly the powers that be are harvesting our energies in certain ways. I mean, it's really like, you don't really need to kind of get into conspiracy or anything to see that. I mean, the powers that be exist as powers that be because we believe that we're powerless. We believe ourselves to be powerless in all the different ways, and we're fractured in all the different ways, and believe we're different than each other, and so on and so forth. And it continues like that. But the basic thing, the powers that be exist as powers that be because we believe we're powerless, and we fear the powers that be. And how did we get there? How did we get here? how do we get here? If you kind of just look at the arc of time and what's happened, and the I don't, it's not like I particularly have a thing about Christianity. And also you can see like what happened with Christianity and the kind of um subversion, or the, the silencing of the goddess, really, which is curious. It's like, okay, well, what is so threatening about the goddess, it's interesting. So there was obviously like a very active and violent, really, takeover that's happened all over the world. I mean, you can just study history, to see that that's not really, that's there's no real conspiracy involved in that perspective. That's kind of what happened. And so people kind of really got beat into submission, and fearing like the church and state. For some reason it keeps coming like that, like the church and state, really fearing the church and state, and believing that, out of fear, actually. I mean, it was really a fear tactic, that the only way we can connect with God or source or spirit is through the church. And or else we might get locked up, or else we might get put into a straight jacket. I mean, if you just kind of take a glance at the arc of time, it's just like, or else, that thing might happen to you that happened to your neighbor, and that lives in our cells, that really lives in our cellular body. And unless we've actively like cleared, the shame and the trauma and everything. I mean, I probably should say that involved in my journey with spirit, I stay steadily like in the process of my own personal healing. Weekly, I work with healers, to clear and to keep clearing trauma, and that which enables me to be able to speak about these things probably openly. But so, yeah, and so we kind of just got like frightened of, but yeah, so why would they not want us? Why would they not want us talking to these beings who could point to the fact that we're in shackles right now? They don't want us to know that we're in shackles. There's all kinds of shackles that the average modern person is in, thinking that we're part of a first world. But like, actually, if you take a look at it from a different lens, we have a whole variety of shackles. And so, and we think that we're free because we're able to buy anything we want. Like, that doesn't equal freedom, being able to buy anything you want. Well, if you're so lucky to have the resources to do that. But anyway, it's because what could get revealed to us. And so it's really, I mean, in a way, it's kind of fascinating to look that like this like spell that got cast on humanity in a way. I mean, that sounds kind of severe to say it in that way. And also I kind of believe that's what happened. And so, in order to, to become like a liberated human, and to kind of come out of trance, to kind of go through a process of what people more commonly speak of as like awakening, to kind of wake up out of the trance. One needs to seemingly be pretty dedicated to the truth. And then what is the truth? I don't know. I guess we find out what that truth is by listening to our internal self. Then that, I feel that gets us closer to the truth, is to keep listening to the insides and not to the outsides, inside. But yeah, it is, in a way, it's kind of fascinating. It's like, well, yeah, that's pretty smart. So you don't act like they don't exist. But you bring their existence into these books that you call fairy tale, and you teach the children that fairy tales equals make-believe. Make-believe equals not real. And so in a way, I mean, it's been pretty successful. And but not totally. I mean, I always have this feeling, this deep internal feeling that like the truth has like the truth is alive. The truth has a will to for itself to be known. Like, the truth always finds a way. I really believe that to be true. Like the truth will always find a way. When it will happen, that's, we don't know, but it does always find a way. You know, the truth has like a vitality to it, and that's what's happening. The truth finds a way. And um my approach with all of this too has not been, you know, I'm not like my interest is not like trying to convert anybody, not at all. I just share what is true in my own heart, and then whoever resonates with it, they do. And you know, it's not like a kind of path of like, I'm going to amass a million followers and everybody's going to believe in the little people. It's like, no, I'm going to share my truth, and that resonates with who it does, and that's what it is, you know.
Mm. And what you're saying about like there's so many truths there anyway. I was just thinking, especially when you're talking about, well, even starting with things like religion, and the way that, for instance, the way that the Bible gets taught and the way that the wording gets twisted around, and it puts you in such a lowly space of, you know, that God is up there and he's smiting you with all this fear, and it's this, you know, it's putting you in the smallest place. Like even because I grew up in the church, so I still remember a lot of the wording around it. And like one of the prayers in communion is, we are not even worthy to eat the crumbs off your table, or something like, you know, this is kind of the way that you kind of come into the whole thing, and some of the hymns that you're singing, and you don't realize that you're casting these spells on yourself by singing them constantly in the name of religion, and also in the name of like living a better life when you die, as opposed to when you're here and awake and stuff, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
There's,
like it's all going to happen in the afterlife.
Yeah, it's
totally.
and the preachers the ones that have always been chastised or been controversial, are the ones that are actually turning the words in on themselves and go, the Bible in itself is more symbolic than it is literal, and it's pointing to other things, and Jesus is not necessarily one person that is unlike you. It's just a state of being that is possible for all of us, and that things like that are super, super contentious. But, you know, in terms of looking at the spell that everyone's on, films and fiction, quote unquote, even something like The Wizard of Oz is like literally telling you what's going on. It's just like a few people or one person behind a curtain that's absolutely running the show.
Exactly.
You know, and if we can go home at any point, you know, if we just kind of follow this thing and then realize it's all nonsense completely.
And what is, I'm so curious too, is like, what is that like for you too in the UK? I mean, because you have like a queen there, and yeah, when you're talking about that, I'm like, wow, what is that like over there? I mean,
do you know, it's like I think there are two like distinct camps of people in the UK that the way that I look at it. There are people that kind of stand behind the monarchy and see it as something that's useful, and see it as something that represents a structure and a history, and then as a result will actually invite people to come into the country and then, you know, enjoy England for all the things that England represents. And maybe up until a point when people bought into that, it was like it kind of looked like that, because the royal family was so untouchable. You know, especially before social media and things like that. But then over the past, you know, 20, 30 years in particular, especially with Diana and then her children, and even particularly with Prince Harry then marrying someone like Meghan Markle, who's an actress who has a very, very normal background. That's kind of really like dissolving the walls of the mystique around the royal family. In the way that I'm looking at it, obviously I'm not there in the thick of it, but I do. Then the media's just really gone for her in a really dark way as well. It's like they've kind of pit the two Diana's sons' wives against each other. So they're creating this divide in the female, and then they're kind of creating the male. It's really dark and murky. So the whole thing about the royal family is particularly to that that generation, the younger generation, I don't think it stands up anymore, really. I don't understand what the point of it is anymore. Someone needs to put me right on it. I don't get it, because they cost a fortune to run these people. You know, you know, they've got all the pump and ceremony, and they've got all of these diamonds, and they've got, you know, when
everybody pays for it, right?
Yeah.
All the people pay for it.
Yeah, it's part of the taxpayer. I mean, they did do a cut, maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe it was about 20 years ago as well, or maybe it was just after Diana died, where they kind of took certain people off the payroll. But for a long, long time, there were a lot of the family that were just, you know, they were born into the right family, and that was okay. And I didn't really understand. They were kind of ambassadors for this and that, but it didn't really seem like, I don't know, you know, as someone who's had to kind of work in a different capacity, then to just represent doesn't necessarily seem like work, I think.
You know, something that I feel called to say too, because, you know, speaking about like the church and state and these kind of like conglomerates of power too, that so many acquiesce to. I mean, not just like, let's say if it's the United States, I mean, these like powers that be, it's not just the United States that, you know, the people of the United States acquiesce to them. It's like the world that does too. I mean, as we know, this isn't a big secret, but then I think about you, and I think about like what I know or perceive about the work that you're doing too, and this kind of female empowerment too. And this is where I feel that we're in this shifting time, and you're touching on that in some way. I feel like you're talking about the younger generations, and I feel like this very much is the shifting times that we're in, that those of us souls, we came in and maybe our calling is a little bit over here, it's a little bit over there, and yet all of it is to, how would I say, like decentralized power, not centralized power, but decentralized. It's with all of the people. It's not some of the people, not just some of them get it. Everybody does. And we have that. It is our birthright. You know, it is our birthright. It is conditioning, very deliberate conditioning, which has us not aware of that. And also it is our birthright. There is no, you know, the queen is no better than any other person, nor is like the president of the United States, and so on and so forth. We are just so deeply generationally conditioned to believe that. But if we can more, you know, kind of feed into this reality of what's just organically happening, that it's us collective, it's us plural, you know.
And also there's more, and that's when you sit down and really think about it, it's like there are more of us like physical beings than there are of these people that we've like given our power over. So it's it doesn't make sense that we keep buying into the idea. But then, you know, when I sit down and think about it, I'm like, whoever came up with this plan to keep people empowered was an absolute genius, because they don't have to do anything at all, because all they've done is got everybody around you to police you for yourself. So it's like your peer group will police you. So if you then want to start doing something different, like, you know, you said your relationships, you lost relationships and friends and things like that. It's when you start to have different ideas and then want to communicate or have a conversation with that before you find your people. And luckily we live in the age of the internet, so we don't have to sit in a room like dreaming about the fact that we might not be crazy is then, because if you then start to speak to somebody, I mean, it goes one of two ways. Is when you suddenly find out there's more to life than what you thought, and you get really excited and start telling everyone, then you want to convert everybody, and then they push you away. So you make that mistake, and then after you've beaten up a few more times, you realize that's not going to work, and then you get frustrated because then you think there's nobody that you can speak to, and realize that if you do say something that's slightly left of field, because everyone's so scared of being different than the same that they want to be, they just keep policing each other. So you don't really have there doesn't have to really be a centralized person.
Exactly.
You just get everyone to keep everyone down. So it's a genius idea.
Totally true. It's totally true. Yeah, it's like it really is. It's like everybody polices each other. It's totally true. And that's what I found is like to continue as my soul wishes to expand and grow. I found that one of the key things that I need to like keep clearing and healing and transforming is basically not being caught up on what people think of me. You know, people will like you, people will not like you. They'll think I'm strange. Like, of course, people may think I'm strange. I talk to little people. It is strange. It's weird. You know, it's not the normal thing. It's different. You know, but just basically kind of just becoming more comfortable with that. That it's like we do come from such the tribe mentality that it's probably hardwired into our system that you don't want to be rejected by the tribe. You know, I think it's really, really hardwired into our system that the worst thing would be to be alienated from the tribe, because it's, if you've spent time with tribes, you see, like, in a way, everybody kind of thinks as one. And so that would be the worst thing, is to be alienated from the tribe. And so I feel that that's really like, it's a real sting that we all feel, that it's like, oh, you know, or am I about to be like, I'm about to be cast out, you know, it's like a real sting that happens. And so I just keep going into the deeper layers. If it's going into past life, I just keep healing and transforming these aspects so that I just basically become more comfortable with being liked or disliked. It's okay. Or there's like a whole variety of people thinking, you know, and then it gets into the adjectives. This is exactly what they say. Not only do they not like you, this is what they think. It gets very descriptive.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, of course. Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, yeah, it can just really, yeah, you're from the UK. I'm sure you hear all sorts of things there.
Of course. People
and are very descriptive.
Yeah, but don't we love to judge?
Yeah, totally.
You know, you were talking about tribe, like being part of the tribe, and I know that you do ancestor healing training and that kind of thing. I know, and I suppose all of us, when we're on this journey, we're then realizing that we have to sit down and unpick the traumas that we've undergone, you know, so that we can start revealing who we are underneath that, and also to forgive what's gone before, and then also to forgive ourselves as well, which is hard work. It is. And do you work with the little people when you're doing the healing, the ancestor healing?
I feel like the Kontomble are always with me to some degree. It's like so when we do the ancestor training, or for sure, the Kontomble are always there, and they act as like intermediaries sometimes, because a lot of our ancestors are not transitioned yet, and that's why we go into these rituals, or these like processes to help their souls get well, we could say. And so the Kontomble, they're always with me in some way, and helping the process, or kind of by my side, guiding me, or even in the mornings when I wake up and I'm, you know, thinking of making a post on Instagram. In some ways, I feel like they're always influencing that to some degree, because I'll just basically wait till I get that message. And so they're very helpful with the ancestor work also, because and maybe that's what we choose to, you know, there's the idea that we chose which family, culture, and so on and so forth that we're incarnating into, and that those of us that maybe have more of like a healing aptitude, that we're helping to heal our ancestry. And it's like you said too, it is hard work. And also once the transformation kind of gets underway, then we can start to experience more of our maybe more of like the bliss of existence, and also more of our soul's potential, our soul's true potential. So we're not just kind of just continuing this like iteration of our ancestors' woes or something, because basically they're stuck, and continuing these karmic cycles, but actually helping them to transform so that we can be more of a really actually experience our potential. That's what I feel is so beautiful. That's what it feels like what you're touching on.
Yeah. Do you envisage a time that, I don't know when this would be, but when this will be the norm, where everyone will either have transcended somehow? Is it like is there like a forerunner? Are there forerunners that have to do like all the heavy lifting, where then the next, you know what I mean, when the next wave will just have an easier go of it, and then there'll be a time on earth where we will have been freed of all these ancestral traumas, where we'll be back to the earth and communicating with the earth and communicating with whoever our indigenous little people are? And do you feel, do the Kontomble ever communicate to you what the vision is that they have for, or what their mission is, or why they've come to you, and what they're helping you to achieve on earth?
I love your questions. I feel like sometimes I hear people talk about timelines, and are you familiar with that, or do you talk about timelines? Do you know that?
I'm familiar with them. I mean, I'm trying to experiment with them in my own life experience. I don't know what the right or the wrong way of doing it is, but I'm aware of timelines. Yes.
So when you ask the question, the way I experience it is there's like timeline potentials, or I see different potentials, and in one of like the more positive potential, then it would be to say yes, totally, like what you're saying is totally true. And I feel like I can sense that it's really, the way I experience it is like I can sense it. It's so interesting because I can sense, let's say if I'm traveling through the States, I can sense like the hardship and the intense energy and stuck, a lot of ghosts and entities and so on and so forth. And also I can sense beneath that, even still, I can sense like a luminosity, and I can sense these things. And so it's like this potential that exists there, that if all goes well, that's going to rise to the surface. And so the way I experience it is basically how I get guided is like, for example, when I was doing more of the ancestor healing rituals, and I would get invited here and here and here and here and here, which I was grateful for, that people would come to the rituals and they would experience transformation. I was grateful for the invitations, and also I realized the way Spirit was working with me, they were like, this needs to multiply and multiply and multiply. And so that's where they're guiding me more now, is just to help to basically train people. It's like the need is great, and there's plenty of people with I can sense this about people, that they have this amazing potential. I sense it in people, and for whatever reason, I feel like the people that get drawn to work towards me are actually they're gifted. I can sense that about them. How do we get from however they're expressing right now and then drawing out those gifts? That's like, they have to encounter their shame and their this, and they have to work through some things to express it fully, but I sense it there. I perceive it. And so that's why they have me more working with, basically training people in training, working with leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
even those, especially those who wouldn't consider themselves to be leaders, yes, especially them. Those, especially the ones that are like, oh no, I could never, I would never, that's not me. It's like, oh yeah, that's the ones that we need, actually, is the ones who would never think of themselves that way, because that's their humility, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, and I do, I really, really feel that that potential is so alive right now. And yeah, that we're kind of doing some of, you know, a lot of us are kind of doing that in some ways, like kind of like grunt work or something, grinding, like more difficult, kind of like really encountering sometimes some really gnarly demons, so that it can be that the tides can shift in such a way that this, what I experienced to be like the new earth, what people talk about like the new earth, I very much experienced that to be a real thing that does exist right beneath the surface. It's here. It's a matter of us just doing our parts, you know, to kind of like conjure the enough courage to like rise to the occasion, but we've got to do our parts, you know.
Gosh, so yeah. Oh, you know, when you were talking about timeline as well, I was just thinking about before I came out here to Bali, and when I was thinking about staying where I was, just thinking about staying in London, everything seemed very blurry. There was no, you know, and it was bizarre because I'd never been to Bali, so I had no vision of what that would be. But if I thought about staying in London, it was like everything just seemed very dim and blurry, and it was faded. And I'm like, it's not here. I don't even know what it is. I just know that I need to get on that plane and go somewhere. So that's like a real kind of real memory of something like that. I've tried it with different things in terms of especially looking at things like past traumas and how to like navigate those, and to see if what if I went back to a certain point in time and decided that my history was different, and then that was my reality, and who would I be if that was my history as opposed to the one that I have and the one that I keep buying into all the time in order to keep telling myself the same stories and to keep doing the same thing and keep waking up with, you know, keep lashing out and being triggered on the same level. What if I decided that this was the situation? So yeah, I'm totally into all of that.
You getting guided to Bali, I mean, to me it feels very also like in the energy of what we were just talking about too, that I don't think I've really talked much about this, but basically my perception of, I mean, I experience Bali like very much as like a seed potential of what I am touching on, of like the new earth, basically, that Bali has been able to maintain its spiritual strength the way it has, in at the same time that it's just basically the whole world is visiting this little island. And when I'm there, I mean, that the spiritual strength is very much present, and the goddess is so alive in Bali. I mean, when I'm there, it's almost, I experience so many visions there, and also, and I have heard the Kontomble talk about Bali specifically, and it does feel very much, to me it feels like it's a really, really important kind of candle, or there's like a vigil that's being held on the earth, and Bali is like holding it down majorly spiritually, and very much of what I feel, if all goes well, is helping to like sprout the new earth. This is very much just speaking from like instinct and visions and messages that I receive. But yeah, it's so interesting that you got called to Bali.
Because yeah, and at this time as well, because I had it in mind to come a couple of years ago and I didn't, and that was kind of after a trip to India. So then to come back and then to feel that I needed to stay and stay a bit longer, because even after those 2 months, I'm like, I've only just got my shoulders down from my earlobes, you know. I've only just started to relax. I need to kind of just stay and maybe just move around a little bit more in terms of start to meet people and talk about what's happening and everything like that. And there's, you know, there's still very distinct places. You can tell when you're in a touristy place, and then you can feel when you're somewhere that's got people who are here on a more long-term basis. And then they're the ones that are the digital nomad, and there's that energy. And then you've got the ones that are really focused on healing and really creating something new. And those, I can really feel the different aspects of being here now, that you have to kind of spend a little while somewhere before you start to be able to feel the temperature of the different corners. Because it's not that big, it's not huge, but then, you know, it does have a different, there's different corners that have different temperatures, so they really do.
If you also, just because you're there in Ubud, and you might know what I'm talking about, because you're speaking about the different temperatures, there's a bridge in Ubud, and you cross it, and there's actually a restaurant called like the Bridges Cafe. I'm not sure, or the Bridges Restaurant. I'm not sure if you know where I'm talking about. But when you
is that on the way up to Penistenen?
I'm not sure, but it's in like more, I think, more central Ubud. But the reason why I mention it is like when you cross that bridge, if you look over to the right, I mean, there's temples all over the island, as you know, but there's this particular temple that every time I cross that bridge, I'm like, what? I mean, anyway, it's amazing, but you'll see it sometime. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot. It's amazing. Yeah, but totally. And there's the digital nomads, and there's all of that going on.
It's a fascinating place. It really is. It's got so much to do, and then it's very Instagrammable, you know, if you want to go down that road as well.
It is.
Just everything is like an Instagram post around here as well. And talking about Instagram posts, this is like the smoothest segue ever, because I was just watching your film earlier. and I was captivated by the scenery and the beauty of. Can you just talk more about filming that and creating that documentary and what you're doing with it? It really touched me. It was just, I'm looking at that going, it's not actually that far from where I am, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the Kontomble, they put me on the most interesting projects sometimes, and I mean, it's in some ways I experience myself to be like a little bit of a hermit or an introvert, so it's just interesting. They're like, they want to film, and I'm like, okay. You want to film, okay, great. And so it happened like that, and they were very specific. They wanted a film where it was honoring the little people of the earth, and especially, and they wanted it to be a documentary, but they wanted it more artistic and, you know, kind of more poetic, and, you know, then like informational, and also and so the vision was clear, and so I was letting them know, okay, you know, all right, so who is that person? And, you know, basically you need to bring them forward. I mean, I don't know how to proceed. And then this woman, Emmy, had contacted me through Facebook, and she had, I guess, listened to some of my interviews or was familiar with my work with the Kontomble, and we had a nice connection. And then, anyway, after talking to her a couple of times, I just got the feeling, I was like, I think it's her, because I saw that she also worked with film. And then at the same time, they were also asking me to go to Mongolia. They put me on really interesting assignments. Go to Mongolia. It's always like, do these things I've never done before. Okay, great. Go to Mongolia with a group of women, and then go to pilgrimage to meet with the reindeer people, and so all these things were happening simultaneously. and then they were telling me to write Emmy, and I asked her, I was like, oh, the Kontomble, they want to film, and and I feel like it should happen when we're in Mongolia, and anyway, and then she was crying from that because she had a vision of there was some vision about Mongolia, and there was this large bird, and anyway, obviously it was her, and so it happened like that. I mean, the spirit energy around it was so strong of just, I mean, I would never have dreamed up such a thing myself. I mean, I don't know if I yet know how to dream that vast, that came really directly from spirit. And so we went into the unknown altogether, us women, and Emmy was, filming all of it and our ceremonies and everything else. And yeah, I feel she did such a beautiful job with uh, uh, sharing it with beauty. I mean, there's such a beautiful energy present in it, and so that's pretty much how it's come about, and it has a life force by now, and it's just, I guess in some ways it feels like it's flying on the wings of spirit, and it seemed like it was well received in a London film festival, and then we recently just heard that it was selected to be shown at an Garifuna, an indigenous film festival, and it's having a little journey.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Just the cinematography and the pace of it and the music and just there's just so much in it, and it's just crisp and it's beautiful. Just to you do really get pulled into it. And I was just watching it on my laptop, so I can only imagine what it would be like to really experience it in a theatre with the surround sound and really get drawn into it. It's a stunning piece. It's you must be really proud to have that, and also to invite people into your world so that it doesn't, because when you're watching the film, it doesn't seem so peculiar what you do.
Totally.
It's the way that she's interweaved it with the talking heads, and even though you're talking about something that is very, very specific and unusual, it's just the way that she shot it. It's just like, this is what we do, and it's like, yeah, of course, you go there and you experience this healing, and you sit with people and you eat their food, and it was like I loved it.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I'm saying I agree about is that I feel Emmy did such a beautiful job of being able to express it in that way. And for me, because I'm so deep in it, I just never could have that kind of perspective. And that's part of, I feel that, I feel Emmy did such a beautiful job in that way, that it's like, it's accessible, and it's something that, like I said, I mean, I am so deep in it. Like, I have no perspective in that way, that it's like, I pretty much, most people that I talk to about spirit. So it's like, it's such a specific world that I live in. And Emmy, I feel like she's so good at bridging that it makes it more accessible.
No, it's beautiful. I really enjoy it, like I said. So I want to ask you the Her Conversations questions that I ask all my guests. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask you one final question. Do you feel that there is like a core message or something that they're trying to translate and awaken us up to, or get us to remember?
Well, I mean, if you ask a core message, I feel really they're trying to bring us back to ourselves. They are so much about authenticity, and I feel like that's just really like a core message or a steady message of them, is they're always trying to get us back to ourselves, and deeper and deeper expressions of authenticity, basically.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let me ask you these questions. So the first one is, what is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
When I consider that question, what comes to me is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given me has come not verbally but non-verbally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's come through different women, and it's the message that it's okay to be you.
Mm.
It's okay to be you. So we get these messages non-verbally, right? When we're in somebody's presence, sometimes they're telling us that they want us to be a certain way, or they'll only accept certain parts of us.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, occasionally, with some people, you get the feeling that you can really just be you. And so thankfully, I've been with women um, who have, I guess, psychically told me that it's okay to be you. And at some point in time, that started to happen, and that enabled me to come more into the fullness of my being. So I feel like that's been more of a collective message from some women that I've had the privilege of sitting in their presence, that have given me the message that it's okay to be me.
Perfect. And that's all we want to hear, really.
Yeah, right?
Somehow we still need that position. And I
Yeah.
suppose the program is so much deeply ingrained in us that we're all trying
Yeah.
to be this same thing, or
Totally.
you've got like 10 celebrities, pick one and don't
Yeah.
deviate from those, so.
Yeah, totally.
And the next question is, which female do you think represents higher energetic resonance?
And as I was mentioning earlier, for some reason, when I feel into that energy, when you speak about the higher energetic resonance, there's something about the Kundalini energy that I
Mm-hmm.
feel, when I feel that energy. And so the female, it would be like female plural. It's females that I sometimes listen to, or I'll like hear them on social media or something, and they're carrying that Kundalini energy or something. It's something about those that feel that it's like carrying that frequency somehow.
Mm. Perfect. And do you have a favorite self-care ritual or practice?
I love massage a lot. So, just having come over to the States again and going through that like whole adjusting, self-care is so important, as you can imagine.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, massage. And also lately I really love just sitting in meditation, just really simple, like no special kind of meditation, just basically sitting in presence. And I feel that that's so nourishing um, for the being. So those I would say are like kind of my top favorites right now.
Brilliant. And so what's next for you? What's next on you? What other countries are you being guided to? What's your next project?
Yeah, the next it's funny, I was talking about like a ritual and a film tour, but then I'm thinking, when am I not touring? It's kind of a perpetual tour by now. It's I will be in Tokyo in May for a ceremonial event and a film showing
Mm.
for the remembering, and then after that, there'll be in June, I'll return to Asheville, North Carolina. There'll be a film showing and a ritual here, and then there'll be an ancestor healing training in Ireland in July. I believe it's the beginning of July, and then there'll be a remembering film showing in Belgrade in Serbia in July, and then in later July there'll be I have a woman's ritual retreat in Serbia, and then next after that will be in December in Bali. I have a woman's ritual facilitator training that's especially like honoring the sensitive leader. So those are the next things that are up ahead for 2019.
Perfect. And where can we find out more about you? Because obviously you've given a list if they haven't got their pens ready.
Yeah. So my website is ancestorbridge.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a website for the film that's theremembering.net. And then I stay pretty active. The only social media that I really stay active on is Instagram. And so I have an Instagram called Kontomble, KONTOMBLE_medicine. That's my Instagram. But so yeah, the websites are ancestorbridge.com, and then there's theremembering.net. And then, as I mentioned, the social media that I'm active on is Instagram for Kontomble Medicine.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you very much, Liv, for agreeing to come on to Her Conversations and sharing so much about your work. It's been fascinating just speaking to you and really digging into the work that you do and demystifying it, because just speaking to you, it just seems like the most natural and normal thing to do. You know, we walk on the earth and earth is in control, you know, so at the end of the day it just makes sense that we communicate with those who really understand, and we're here before us. So thank you for coming on to Her Conversations.
Oh, thank you so much, and it's a total joy to connect with your spirit, and I hope to sometime connect in person.
I'm sure it's going to happen somehow.
Yeah, I feel that too. Okay.
It will. Perfect.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Thanks to Liv for joining me on this episode of Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. And one point and one development that we didn't mention during the recording is that Liv is going to be holding a retreat in April 2020 in the Azores, and I will actually be joining Liv on that retreat and offering voice work as one of the workshops within that retreat, which is next year. So you can have a look on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com. That's carolmaywhittick.com for more information with regards to that. And also this month I'll be launching the Her Life Academy at the end of April 2019, and this is monthly instruction and inspiration for the awakening woman. So it's created for you to magnify your spirituality, your sensuality and your soul, and live a life of higher energetic resonance. So visit my website for more details, and you can sign up there now to get more information and early bird access to that. Also on social media, you can find me on Facebook under Carol May Whittick. My Instagram handle is Casmic, that's CAZMICK. And also Her Life Academy has her own Instagram at Her Life Academy. And also if you can like, share, comment, subscribe to the platform that you're listening to this podcast on, I greatly appreciate it. There's more exciting things happening in 2019, and I can't wait to share all of that with you. But until the next week, have a good one, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.